When his stepmother kicked him out with nothing but a worthless deed, he thought his life was over. But what he discovered in that forgotten cave would change not just his future, but the past he thought he knew. If you've ever felt like the world has written you off, or been handed a situation that felt hopeless, then this story is for you. Stick around, and maybe even subscribe, because we're going to talk about what happens when you find value where everyone else only saw dirt. The front door clicked shut behind me, the sound as final as a gavel. It wasn't a slam. Brenda wasn't the slamming type. She was the type to use quiet, precise movements that somehow carried more violence than any outburst. The click was an execution. My life in that house, the 17 years since my mom died and my dad remarried, was over. I stood on the porch, the paint peeling under my sneakers, holding a single cardboard box. It wasn't heavy. 2 changes of clothes, a worn paperback, my phone charger, and the high school diploma I'd been so proud of just 3 months ago. It felt like a prop from a different life. Brenda had made it clear. I was 18 now, a legal adult. My father was gone, and with him, any obligation she felt she had toward me. The house was hers. The money was hers. My continued presence was, in her words, an unnecessary complication. She had handed me the box this morning with the same detached efficiency she used to hand out mail. Then came the envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, and felt important. "Your father's lawyer, Mr. Davies, dropped this off," she'd said, not looking at me. "It's your inheritance from your mother's side, your grandfather." I didn't remember my maternal grandfather. He died when I was a toddler. My mom used to talk about him, about the land he had up north, a wild, beautiful place she'd loved. After she passed, those stories stopped. My father never brought him up, and Brenda certainly had no interest. "What is it?" I'd asked, turning the heavy paper over in my hands. She gave a short, dry laugh. It was the kind of sound a snake might make if it could find humor in things. "It's a deed to his property. A few acres of scrubland and a worthless limestone cave. Your father tried to sell it for years. Nobody wants it. It's a tax burden." She looked at me then, her eyes cold and clear. "Consider it your fresh start. Now you have a place to go." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an eviction notice. I stood there on the porch, the weak morning sun filtering through the oak trees my dad had planted. I could smell the cut grass from the neighbor's yard, a smell that had always meant summer, safety, suburbia. Now it just smelled like someone else's life. The box in my arms felt pathetic. My entire existence reduced to what I could carry. I looked back at the door. I had this fleeting, childish urge to pound on it, to demand something more, an explanation, an apology, maybe just one of the good towels. But I knew it was useless. The click had been final. I took a deep breath, the air catching in my throat. This was it, the start of whatever came next. Alone, with a box of clothes and a deed to a worthless cave. It felt less like a beginning and more like an end. I started walking down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my feet. Each step was a deliberate act of not looking back. The street was quiet, lined with manicured lawns and identical mailboxes. I had never felt so alien here. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't Brenda. It was a calendar notification. Dad's birthday. A fresh wave of grief, sharp and sudden, washed over me. He'd been gone 6 months. It still felt like I was waiting for him to walk through the door, smelling of sawdust and coffee, and fix everything. But he couldn't fix this. He was part of what was broken. I swiped the notification away and kept walking. I had an appointment with Mr. Davies. Brenda had at least given me that. A final, formal severing of ties. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew one thing. I couldn't go back. The only way was forward, toward a place I'd never seen, a legacy I'd never known, and a future that felt as dark and empty as a worthless cave. Mr. Davies' office was on the 7th floor of a glass building downtown that was designed to make you feel small. It succeeded. The lobby was all marble and hushed echoes. The receptionist looked at me over her glasses, her expression a carefully neutral mask that still managed to convey disapproval of my worn jeans and the cardboard box I'd tucked under my arm. She buzzed me in without a word. The office itself was a fortress of mahogany and leather. Books with gold-leaf titles lined the walls, looking like they'd never been opened. The air smelled of old paper and expensive air freshener. Mr. Davies was an older man, thin and precise, with hair the color of a winter sky. He stood when I entered, a gesture that felt more like a formality than a welcome. "Leo," he said, his voice dry as dust. "Please, have a seat." I sat in a leather chair that was so deep I felt like it was trying to swallow me. I put my box on the floor beside me. It looked even more pathetic here. "Thank you for seeing me, sir." "It's the least I could do for your father," he said, sitting down behind his enormous desk. He folded his hands, his fingertips touching. "I was his attorney for 20 years, a good man." He paused. "I'm sorry for your loss, and I am aware of your current circumstances." He said circumstances like it was a terminal diagnosis. "Brenda explained things," I said, my voice sounding small in the big room. He nodded slowly. "Yes, Brenda has been proactive." The way he said it suggested it wasn't a compliment. He slid the cream-colored envelope across the desk toward me. It was the one Brenda had given me, but he had another, identical one next to it. "This is the official deed to the property in Westfall County. It was your grandfather's, passed to your mother, and upon her death, held in trust for you until your 18th birthday. It is now legally and exclusively yours." He tapped the paper. "As your stepmother correctly, if indelicately, pointed out, it is not considered a high-value asset. The land is mostly rock. The cabin on the property is, by all accounts, in a state of severe disrepair. The annual property taxes are modest, but they are now your responsibility." He sounded like he was reading an obituary, my own. "Okay," I said, my throat tight. "Okay." I had nowhere else to go. A dilapidated cabin was better than a bus station bench. At least, I hoped it was. Mr. Davies opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small, heavy wooden box. It was dark, polished wood with a simple brass latch. He pushed it across the desk to join the envelope. "This is also yours. It was with your mother's personal effects. Your father asked me to hold it for you, along with the deed. He said your mother would have wanted you to have it when you were old enough to understand." I stared at the box. It was beautiful, solid. I'd never seen it before. "What is it?" "I don't know," he said, and for the first time, his professional mask seemed to slip. A flicker of something, sympathy maybe, crossed his face. "Your father never told me. The instructions were clear. Give it to you on your 18th birthday with the deed. That's all." I reached out and touched the wood. It was cool and smooth, a direct link to her. A woman I was starting to forget, her face fading into a handful of photographs. "Mr." Davies cleared his throat, his composure restored. Leo, I want to be frank. Your financial situation is precarious. The trust your father set up for your education was dissolved. Brenda is the sole beneficiary of his estate. He didn't leave me anything? The question came out as a whisper. It wasn't about the money. It was about the thought. A final, "I love you," from beyond the grave. Mr. Davies looked uncomfortable. Your father's will was amended 2 years ago. It is ironclad. I can't discuss the specifics, but the outcome is what it is. 2 years ago. That's when Dad's business started struggling. That's when the arguments with Brenda got worse. Always late at night. Always about money. Had he traded me away to keep the peace? To save his marriage? The thought was a punch to the gut. Now, the lawyer continued, leaning forward slightly, about the land. There has been some interest over the years. A company, Titan Quarry Corporation, has made several offers. They're a large aggregate and mining company. The offers were low. Your father always refused. But they are persistent. He looked me directly in the eye. They will likely contact you. Be aware that their initial offer will be their lowest. If you decide to sell, you should not do it without legal counsel. Myself or someone else. Brenda said it was worthless, I said. Brenda may have been given information that led her to that conclusion, he said, his choice of words deliberate. Or she may have her own reasons for wanting you to believe that. A quick, uncomplicated sale can be appealing to some. He let that hang in the air, a seed of doubt. Why would Brenda lie about it being worthless if a company wanted to buy it? Unless the offer she knew about wasn't the real one. I picked up the deed and the wooden box. The paper felt flimsy, but the box was solid. Grounding. Is there anything else? I asked, needing to escape the suffocating quiet of that office. One more thing. He handed me a business card and a key. The key was old, iron, and oddly shaped. That's the key to the cabin. It was in the file. And that's my personal cell number, not the office line. If you find yourself in a situation you don't understand, or if you just need to talk to someone who isn't trying to sell you something or take something from you, call me. It was the most human thing he'd said all morning. It was an anchor. I stood up, cradling the box and the envelope like they were the last remnants of a shipwreck. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Good luck, Leo, he said, his voice softer now. Your mother was very proud of you. She talked about you constantly, and she loved that land. Don't ever forget that. I walked out of the office, past the disapproving receptionist, and into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I looked at the key in my hand. It didn't look like it belonged to a cabin. It looked like it belonged to a story. And for the first time that day, a tiny, fragile flicker of something other than despair sparked inside me. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was a question. And a question was better than nothing at all. The bus station was a symphony of quiet desperation. People sleeping on hard plastic chairs, people staring at departure boards with the hollow eyes of those who are running either toward something or away from it. I was doing both. I bought a one-way ticket to a town called Harmony, the closest stop to the pin Mr. Davies had marked on a map for me. The name sounded like a cruel joke. The bus ride was 6 hours long. 6 hours of watching the polished skyscrapers of the city give way to the endless, sprawling suburbs, which then bled into flat, uninteresting farmland. I leaned my head against the vibrating window, the world smearing past in a blur of green and brown. I opened the wooden box on my lap. The inside was lined with faded velvet. There were no jewels, no hidden treasures, just a handful of my mother's things. A silver locket, tarnished with age. Inside, a microscopic picture of her and a man I assumed was my grandfather, standing in front of a rocky cliff face. She was smiling, her face full of a light I barely remembered. There was a pressed wildflower, its color faded to a pale lavender. And there was a small, leather-bound journal, her journal. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Her handwriting was a series of elegant loops and sharp, determined strokes. The entries weren't dated with years, just seasons. Most of them were about the land, the place she called the Hollow. Summer. The air in the cave is always cool, a perfect escape from the heat. Papa says it's the heart of the mountain, breathing slow and deep. I can hear the water dripping, a clock that measures time in centuries, not minutes. I feel safe here, whole. My mother, a person I remembered as soft smiles and warm hands, was also this thoughtful, almost mystical woman who wrote about caves and mountains. It was like discovering a new room in a house you thought you knew. I closed the journal. It felt too private to read on a public bus, surrounded by strangers. It was a conversation I needed to have with her alone. The landscape began to change again. The flat fields rose into rolling hills, then into the sharper angles of low mountains, covered in a thick blanket of trees. The sky seemed bigger out here. The clouds more dramatic. We were climbing. The bus wheezed its way up steep grades, the engine groaning in protest. We passed signs for scenic overlooks and warnings for falling rocks. This was a different world from the flat, predictable grid of my old life. Harmony, when we finally arrived, was little more than a wide spot in the road. A gas station, a diner with a buzzing neon sign, a general store, and a handful of houses. The bus hissed to a stop, and the driver called out the name. I was the only one who got off. The air hit me first. It was clean and sharp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. It was so quiet. The only sound was the hum of the diner's sign and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. I felt the eyes of the few people around on me. The stranger with the city clothes and the cardboard box. I checked the map Mr. Davies had given me. The property was another 3 miles up the road. No sidewalk, just a gravel shoulder. I shifted the box under my arm and started walking. The road sloped steadily upward. The trees crowded in, their branches interlocking overhead, creating a tunnel of green. Sunlight dappled the asphalt. It was beautiful, but it was also intimidating. The wildness of it felt immense, ancient, and utterly indifferent to me and my small problems. After 45 minutes of walking, my legs burning, I saw it. A rusted metal gate, half swallowed by overgrown bushes. A faded, hand-carved wooden sign hung from one hinge. The Hollow. This was it. The gate wasn't locked. It shrieked in protest as I pushed it open. A narrow dirt track, more of a suggestion than a road, wound its way into the woods. I followed it, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. The track opened into a small clearing, and there was the cabin. Dilapidated was a generous word. The roof sagged in the middle like a tired old horse. The porch steps were gone, replaced by a precarious stack of cinder blocks. The windows were boarded up, and the paint had been scoured away by years of wind and rain, leaving the wood a ghostly gray. A wave of absolute despair washed over me. This wasn't a fresh start. This was a tomb. I could just turn around, walk back to the road, and stick my thumb out. Go anywhere. But where? The little money I had wouldn't last a week. This place, this wreck, was the only thing in the entire world that was mine. I walked up to the front door, avoiding the cinder blocks and stepping directly onto the warped porch. The iron key from Mr. Davies felt cold and heavy in my hand. I pushed it into the lock. It resisted, gritty with rust. I put my shoulder into it, turning with all my strength. There was a loud, painful groan of metal, and then a solid clunk. The lock had turned. I took a deep breath, held it, and pushed the door open. It swung inward on one hinge, scraping a semicircle into the thick dust on the floor. The air that rolled out was thick and musty, the smell of trapped time, of mice and decay and forgotten things. I stepped across the threshold, from the bright, wild green of the outside into the dark, silent heart of my inheritance. The light from the open door cut a single golden rectangle into the darkness, illuminating a blizzard of dust motes dancing in the air. This was home, for now. The inside of the cabin was one large room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a gaping black mouth filled with old ashes and debris. A simple wooden table and 2 chairs stood in the center of the room, coated in a thick, velvety layer of dust. In one corner, a narrow cot with a stained, flattened mattress. In another, a small kitchenette area, a rusty hand pump for water, a wood-burning stove, and a few empty shelves. Everything was draped in cobwebs, thick and intricate as lace shawls. It was worse than I had imagined. My first instinct was to run, but the exhaustion in my bones was heavier than the despair in my heart. I dropped my box on the dusty table, the sound muffled and dead. I had to make this work. I had to. The first order of business was light and air. I went to the nearest window and worked my fingers into the gap between the boards and the frame. The wood was soft, pulpy with rot. I pulled. A nail screeched. I pulled harder, putting my back into it. The board came away with a sudden crack, showering me with dirt and dead insects. Light flooded in, revealing the true extent of the decay. But it was light. I did the same to the other 2 windows, my hands raw and splintered by the end. The room was transformed. It was still a wreck, but it was a visible wreck. I could see the enemy now. I found a tattered broom in a corner, its bristles worn down to nubs. For the next 2 hours, I swept. I swept away the years. Thick blankets of dust rolled across the floor. I evicted desiccated spiders and the ghosts of long-dead flies. I swept until the floorboards, rough and uneven as they were visible again. The wood was dark, stained by time, but it was solid. The foundation of the place was still good. Next was the water. I gripped the cold iron handle of the pump in the kitchenette and pushed down. It gave a dry, rattling gasp. I pumped again, and again. For a full 5 minutes I worked the handle, my arms starting to ache, rewarded only by wheezing sounds from the pipes. I was about to give up, my throat parched and my hope sinking, when I heard it. A low gurgle from deep in the earth. I pumped with renewed vigor. The gurgle grew louder, closer. And then a shudder ran through the pipe, and a trickle of rusty brown water sputtered from the spout. I kept pumping. The water slowly cleared, from brown to yellow to finally a stream of cold, clear water. I cupped my hands under it and drank. It was the best water I had ever tasted. It tasted like survival. That night, I unrolled the thin sleeping bag I'd stuffed in my box and laid it on the cot. I didn't have a lamp, so as the sun went down, the cabin sank back into darkness. The woods came alive with sound. The chirp of crickets, the mournful call of an owl, the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. It was terrifying. Every creak of the old cabin, every snap of a twig outside, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was a city kid, used to the drone of traffic and the predictable noises of neighbors. This was a different language of the night, one I didn't understand. I clutched the small wooden box my mother's things were in, holding it to my chest like a shield. I was scared. I was lonely. But as I lay there in the dark, a strange thought occurred to me. No one knew where I was. No one was coming for me. And while that was terrifying, it was also, in a weird way, freeing. I wasn't Brenda's unwanted burden anymore. I wasn't my father's forgotten son. I was just Leo, in a broken-down cabin in the middle of nowhere. For the first time in a long time, I was completely, utterly my own. I fell asleep to the sound of the mountain breathing. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Wake with the sun, sweep, clean, try to patch the worst of the holes in the walls with scraps of wood and mud. I found a small stash of canned goods in a crawlspace under the floor. Beans, mostly, probably decades old, but edible. My world shrank to the size of this clearing. The cabin, the trees, the sky. On the third day, I decided it was time to find the cave. Brenda's voice echoed in my head. A worthless limestone cave. But my mother's journal told a different story. The cave is my sanctuary. I followed a faint path leading away from the back of the cabin, deeper into the woods. The air grew cooler, the smell of damp stone stronger. After a 10-minute walk, I saw it. The entrance was a dark slash in a sheer rock face, partially hidden by ferns and moss. It wasn't a massive gaping maw like in the movies. It was a modest opening, just tall enough for me to walk into without ducking. I stood at the entrance, peering into the blackness. A cool, steady breeze flowed out, carrying the scent of deep earth and water. It felt ancient. Taking a deep breath, I switched on my phone's flashlight and stepped out of the sunlight into the heart of the mountain. The transition was immediate. The warmth of the afternoon vanished, replaced by a profound, cellar-like cold that seeped into my clothes. The sounds of the forest, the birds, the wind in the trees, were sliced off as if by a closing door. All I could hear was the drip, drip, drip of water echoing in the immense silence, and the sound of my own breathing, loud and ragged. My phone's flashlight beam cut a weak, trembling circle in an ocean of black. It danced over walls of limestone, smooth and flowing in some places, jagged and rough in others. The rock was a tapestry of grays and whites, streaked with veins of darker minerals. Water glistened on the surfaces, each droplet a tiny captured star. I walked deeper, my sneakers crunching on the gravelly floor. The passage was narrow at first, but it soon opened into a larger chamber. I swept my light around, and my breath caught in my chest. The ceiling soared upwards, far beyond the reach of my small light, lost in the darkness above. Formations dripped down like wax from a giant candle, and rose from the floor like ghostly sentinels. It was a cathedral of stone, built by water and time. It wasn't worthless, it was beautiful. Hauntingly, breathtakingly beautiful. I thought of my mother's words, the heart of the mountain, breathing slow and deep. I could feel it now. a sense of peace, of stillness, that was a world away from the frantic anxiety of my life. I spent what felt like hours in there, just walking, exploring the main chamber. I was careful not to touch anything, remembering field trips where teachers warned us that the oils on our skin could stop the formations from growing. This place felt sacred. It deserved respect. As I was about to head back out, the light growing dim on my phone battery, the beam caught something odd on one of the walls. It was a section of rock that seemed different, flatter, more uniform. And there was a dark line, almost like a crack, but too perfectly straight. Curiosity piqued, I ran my fingers along it. The rock was cold, but this section felt different, less like natural stone and more like cut stone. A block. I pushed against it gently. Nothing. I pushed harder. It didn't budge. I traced the outline with my fingers. It was a near-perfect rectangle, about 2 feet tall and a foot wide. It was camouflaged brilliantly, but it was undeniably man-made, or at least man-altered. My grandfather. It had to be. Why would he hide a section of the wall? I searched the edges, my fingers probing for a latch, a handle, anything. Near the bottom corner, my nail caught on a small indentation. I dug at it, scraping away a bit of accumulated calcite. It was a hole, just big enough for a fingertip. I hooked my finger in and pulled. The block didn't move, but I heard a faint click from within the wall. I tried pushing the block again, this time on the opposite side. It shifted, just a fraction of an inch, but it moved, scraping against the surrounding rock. My heart hammered. I put my shoulder into it and pushed. With a low, grinding groan, the stone block pivoted inward, revealing a dark, rectangular cavity. I shone my phone's dying light inside. There, sitting on a small carved shelf, was a metal box. It was an old military-style ammunition can, painted olive green, with lettering stenciled on the side. It was sealed shut with a heavy padlock. A padlock that looked just as old and unusual as the iron key to the cabin. Of course, the key wasn't for the cabin. Or not just for the cabin. I scrambled back out of the cave, my mind racing. The sun was blinding after the absolute dark. I ran back to the cabin, fumbled through my box, and found the key. My hands were shaking as I ran back to the cave entrance and plunged back into the cold and the dark. I reached the hidden compartment, my light flickering ominously now. I slid the strange old key into the padlock. It was a perfect fit. I turned it. The lock sprang open with a loud, satisfying snap. I lifted the heavy metal box out of the wall and set it on the cave floor. It was heavier than it looked. I took a deep breath, undid the latches on the side, and lifted the lid. The contents were wrapped in oilcloth. Carefully, I unwrapped the package. It wasn't gold. It wasn't jewels. It was a stack of leather-bound journals, just like my mother's, and a thick bundle of letters tied with twine. On top of the pile was a single sealed envelope, with one word written on it in a strong, slanted hand. Leo. This whole time, this journey, this inheritance, it had all been leading me here, to this moment. In the dark, in the cold, with a dead man's words waiting for me. And I had a feeling that whatever was in these pages was going to change everything. This is a moment, isn't it? That point where you're holding the past in your hands, and you know that opening it will rewrite your future. Have you ever had a moment like that? A letter you were afraid to open, a phone call you were afraid to make, a truth you were afraid to face. If you have, you know the feeling. Your whole world shrinks down to that single choice. Open it or walk away. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to make a choice like that. Because right now, I feel like you're all here with me in this cave, and I need to know I'm not alone. Now, let's get back to the story. I had to know what he'd written. I sat on the cold floor of the cave, my phone's flashlight finally giving up the ghost and plunging me into absolute blackness. But it didn't matter. I had the box. I scrambled back to the cabin, the heavy ammo can banging against my leg. I burst through the door into the dusty, sunlit room and set the box on the table with a loud thud. My hands were trembling. I took out the envelope with my name on it first. The paper was thick, aged to a soft ivory. I broke the wax seal, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The letter was dated 20 years ago, shortly after I was born. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope, strong and confident. Leo, if you are reading this, then many things have happened. I am gone. Your mother, my dear Eleanor, is likely gone too. And the world has finally pushed you to this place, the only real sanctuary I could build for you. I am sorry for the life you must have lived to get here. I am sorry for the secrets I had to keep. But I hope, once you understand, you will see that it was all done for love. Your mother loved this land. She called it her hollow, her quiet place. But this land is more than just quiet. It holds a secret, one I discovered by accident a lifetime ago. The world will call it valuable. They will want to grind it into dust for profit. To me, it is priceless, a piece of history, of wonder, that must be protected. You have no doubt been told this property is worthless. I myself started that rumor. It was the only way. There are men, and there are companies, who see a mountain and only wonder how much gravel it will yield. One such company, Titan Quarry, has been circling this land like a vulture for years. They know the limestone is of high quality, but they don't know the real prize. They must never know. Go to the back of the main chamber in the cave. On the west wall, about 20 feet from the floor, you will see it. A shadow in the stone. A story told in bone. I stopped reading, my mind reeling. A shadow in the stone? A story told in bone? I had to see. I grabbed a flashlight from my emergency kit, a cheap one but better than nothing, and a rope I'd found in the shed, and ran back to the cave. This time, I went in with a purpose. I navigated to the main chamber, my light cutting a confident path. I found the west wall, a sheer cliff of pale limestone. I scanned the surface, moving the beam back and forth. Nothing, just rock. I remembered his words, 20 feet from the floor. The wall was scalable in places, with natural ledges and handholds. I found a route that looked manageable and started to climb, the rope coiled over my shoulder just in case. The rock was cold and damp under my fingers. I moved slowly, testing each hold. At what I guessed was about 20 feet up, I found a wider ledge, just big enough to stand on. I braced myself against the wall and shone the light. And then I saw it. It wasn't obvious at first. It was subtle, a slight discoloration in the rock, a gentle curving pattern. But as my eyes adjusted, the shape began to emerge. It was a spine, a long, articulated vertebral column embedded perfectly in the limestone wall. I moved the light, following the curve. I saw the delicate arches of a rib cage, the broad, paddle-like shape of a flipper, and then the head. A long, narrow snout filled with conical teeth. A huge eye socket, a dark void staring out at me from across 90 million years of silence. It was a skeleton, a complete skeleton of some enormous prehistoric marine reptile locked in a stone tomb. It was breathtaking. It was impossible. It was the most incredible thing I had ever seen. I stayed on that ledge for a long time, just tracing the shape with my flashlight beam. A mosasaur, maybe, or an ichthyosaur, trapped in the sediment of an ancient sea that once covered this entire continent. This wasn't just a fossil. It was a perfect specimen, a time capsule. This wasn't worthless. This was a scientific treasure beyond measure. Brenda hadn't just lied. She had been profoundly, spectacularly wrong. Or she had known, and this was her final, cruelest joke. I climbed down, my body numb, my mind ablaze. I returned to the cabin and sat back down with my grandfather's letter. I read on, my hands shaking so much the paper rattled. Now you see. Titan wants the limestone. If they get this land, they will blast this mountain into rubble, and this perfect, beautiful creature will be turned into concrete and road fill. They will not see it, or if they do, they will not care. It will be destroyed. I tried to have it declared a site of scientific importance. The bureaucracy was endless. They needed proof, surveys, experts. And the moment I started the process, the sharks began to circle. Titan caught wind of it. Their offers increased. Local officials, men I'd known my whole life, suddenly had new cars and were advising me to sell. The threat was no longer just about money. So I stopped. I buried the research. And I started the rumor that the land was barren, the cave unstable. I made my treasure worthless to the world, to protect it. I am leaving you not a fortune, Leo, but a choice. A terrible, wonderful choice. You can expose this secret, sell it to a university or a museum, or you can sell it to Titan. They will pay you a fortune, more money than you can imagine, enough to live a life of ease. Or you can do as I have done. You can be its guardian. You can keep the secret. You can live here, on this land, and simply let it be. The choice is yours. It is the only real inheritance a man can give. Not wealth, but responsibility. I finished the letter and let it fall to the table. The weight of it all crashed down on me. The beauty of the fossil, the cynicism of the company, the quiet, stubborn heroism of my grandfather. He hadn't abandoned his family. He had been protecting a legacy, not for fame or money, but for its own sake. He had spent his life standing between this miracle and a bulldozer. And now, that responsibility was mine. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the dusty table, the cabin lit by a single candle, and I read. I read my grandfather's other journals and the letters. It was a lifetime of secrets, laid bare in the flickering light. The journals were a chronicle of his guardianship, entries about near misses with hunters who wandered too close to the cave, detailed notes on the geology of the area, sketches of the fossil, meticulous and loving. He wasn't just a landowner. He was a self-taught paleontologist, a geologist, a fierce and devoted protector. But it was the letters that broke my heart. They were to my grandmother, written after she had passed away. In them, he confessed his fears, his loneliness, his unwavering commitment. And he revealed the other half of the secret, the part that was even heavier than the fossil. My dearest Sarah, one letter began. The Titan Company is sniffing around again. A man in a suit came by today, offered me $50,000. Said it was a good faith offer for such a barren plot. I saw the hunger in his eyes. He knows there's something here. He just doesn't know what. It reminds me of how this all began, with Arthur. Arthur, it turned out, was his original partner. They had bought the land together as young men, dreaming of opening a small local quarry. It was Arthur who had first found the fossil. But Arthur had seen dollar signs, not wonder. He wanted to sell it to the highest bidder, chop it up if he had to. My grandfather refused. The partnership dissolved into a bitter feud. Arthur threatened to go public, to expose the fossil and trigger a land rush that would destroy everything. I had to buy him out, Sarah, the letter continued. I had to silence him. He demanded $100,000, a king's ransom back then. I didn't have it. I went to a man in the city, a lender. Not the kind with offices and business cards, the kind with broken noses and no sense of humor. I took a loan. I paid Arthur off, and he disappeared. But that debt has been a shadow over my life ever since. I spent 30 years paying it off. Every spare dollar, every bit of sweat. I let the cabin fall to ruin. I let people think I was a poor, eccentric old man. It was the only way to be free, to make sure the land was truly mine, truly ours, to pass on to Eleanor. My breath hitched. This wasn't just about a corporation. It was about a desperate choice, a dangerous debt, a lifetime of secret sacrifice. He hadn't just been poor, he had chosen poverty. He had chosen a life of hardship to pay for this secret, to protect it not just from a company, but from the consequences of his own desperate act. He had bought this land twice over, once with money and once with his life. I found another letter, this one addressed to my mother. My sweet Eleanor, I hope I have the chance to tell you all this in person. I hope to show you the great beast in the stone and explain why I have lived as I have. I know your husband, Robert, is a good man, but he is a practical man. He sees the taxes, the disrepair. You will not understand. He will want to sell. I fear I have given you a gift that looks like a burden. Please, when it is yours, do not let him cast it aside. It is more than land. It is our story. It is your sanctuary. I closed my eyes, the image of my father, practical and kind, flashing in my mind. He had tried to sell it. He hadn't understood. He saw a tax burden, not a sanctuary, not a story. He wasn't a bad man. He just couldn't see the hidden value. And Brenda only saw the cash, a quick sale. Mr. Davies' words came back to me. Brenda may have her own reasons for wanting you to believe that. Titan Quarry must have approached her after Dad died. They must have offered her a small sum, a finder's fee, to get me, the new owner, to sell cheap. She kicked me out and sent me here, to a worthless property, hoping I'd be desperate enough to take the first offer that came along. An offer she had probably already arranged. The sheer, cold-blooded calculus of it made me sick. She wasn't just getting rid of me. She was trying to profit from my inheritance, to strip mine my mother's legacy for a few $1,000s. I felt a surge of anger so pure and hot it almost choked me. Anger at Brenda. Anger at the world for what it had done to my grandfather. But underneath the anger was a profound, aching grief. I cried. For the first time since my father's funeral, I truly cried. I cried for my grandfather, for his lonely, sacrificial life. I cried for my mother, who had loved this place so much and never got to inherit its secret. I cried for my dad, who had tried to do the right thing but couldn't see the whole picture. And I cried for myself, for the boy who had lost everything, only to be handed the weight of a 90-million-year-old secret and a dead man's promise. I sat there until the candle burned down to a stub, the first gray light of dawn creeping through the grimy windows. The anger had cooled. The grief had settled into a heavy quiet. All that was left was the choice my grandfather had written about. The terrible, wonderful choice. I could expose the fossil, call a university, become famous, maybe. The boy who found the sea monster. Or I could call Titan Quarry, tell them what I had, name my price. $1 million? 10 million? Enough to erase the memory of Brenda's cold smile and the feel of that cardboard box in my arms. I could walk away from this broken cabin and never look back. It was the easy path, the path of comfort, of revenge. The harder path was to stay, to take up my grandfather's post, to live a quiet life, a poor life, as the secret keeper, to protect this place from the world. What was I? Was I the son of my practical father, the man who would have sold? Or was I the grandson of the secret keeper, the man who sacrificed everything for something he believed in? I looked at my hands, raw and dirty from the last few days of work. I looked around the dusty, broken cabin that was starting to feel less like a prison and more like a fortress. I knew what I had to do. The decision settled in my bones, solid and heavy as the mountain itself. It wasn't a flash of inspiration. It was a slow, quiet dawn. I would protect it. I wouldn't sell. Not to Titan, not to anyone. The legacy of sacrifice my grandfather had left me was more valuable than any amount of money. Selling it would be like selling his soul, my soul. The next morning, I walked the 3 miles back into Harmony. The journey felt different this time. My steps were sure. The forest didn't feel intimidating. It felt like it was mine. I went to the small general store. An old woman with kind eyes and a cloud of white hair stood behind the counter. "You're the boy staying up at the old hollow," she said. It wasn't a question. "News travels fast," I said with a small smile. "It's a small town," she replied, her eyes twinkling. "Things don't stay secret for long." The irony of that statement was not lost on me. I bought what I could afford with the last of my cash: flour, salt, beans, a few tools, and a proper oil lamp. As she was bagging my things, she paused. That place, it was Eleanor's pride and joy, and her father's before her. He was a good man, quiet, kept to himself, but good. "I'm her son," I said. The woman's face softened. "I know. You have her eyes." The simple acknowledgement, the connection to my mother from a total stranger, felt like a gift. I walked back to the cabin with my supplies, my resolve hardening with every step. I had a purpose now. I wasn't just surviving, I was guarding. The next week was a blur of hard, satisfying labor. I repaired the porch steps with fresh wood from a fallen tree. I patched the roof. I cleared the overgrown garden plot behind the cabin, turning over the rich, dark soil. I was building a life, not just a shelter. One afternoon, as I was splitting firewood, a sleek black truck I didn't recognize pulled up the dirt track. My heart jumped into my throat. 2 men in crisp shirts and steel-toed boots got out. One was older, with a leathery, sun-beaten face and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The other was younger, clutching a clipboard like a shield. "Leo?" the older man called out, walking toward me. "My name's Hank. This is Mike. We're from Titan Quarry." It was them. The vultures had arrived. I leaned the axe against the chopping block and wiped my sweaty hands on my jeans. I stood my ground. "I know who you are." Hank's smile widened a fraction. "Good. Saves time. We knew your father. We'd been talking to him for years about this place. A shame what happened to him. A real shame." His sympathy was as fake as a $3 bill. "We're here to renew our offer. We know the property is just passed to you, and we're prepared to make things very easy for you. Help you get a real, fresh start." He was using Brenda's words. The thought sent a jolt of cold anger through me. "We can offer you $75,000, cash. We sign the papers today. You can be on a bus to anywhere you want by nightfall." 75,000. It was a lot of money. More money than I'd ever seen. A month ago, I would have taken it without a second thought. I would have run. But a month ago, I didn't know about the story in the stone. I didn't know about my grandfather's sacrifice. "The land's not for sale," I said. My voice was steady. Hank's smile faltered. "Son, let's be realistic. This place is a wreck. It's a tax burden. 75 grand is more than fair. It's generous." "The answer is no." The younger man, Mike, flipped a page on his clipboard. "Our geologists have confirmed the limestone deposits are significant. The offer is based on tonnage estimates. It's a solid, data-driven offer." He sounded like a robot. "I don't care about your data," I said, looking straight at Hank. "This was my mother's land. It's my home now. It's not for sale." Hank's friendly demeanor evaporated. His eyes went flat and hard. "You're making a mistake, kid. A big one. That offer isn't going to get any better. In fact, things could get complicated. Property lines, easements, environmental surveys. It's a lot for a kid to handle on his own." It was a threat wrapped in corporate jargon. My grandfather's words echoed in my head. Local officials with new cars. "I'll take my chances," I said. Hank stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. He was reassessing me. I wasn't the desperate, scared kid he was expecting. "Have it your way," he finally spat out. He turned and walked back to the truck, Mike scrambling after him. The truck roared to life, spun around, and sped back down the track, leaving a cloud of dust and exhaust in its wake. I stood there, my heart hammering, the axe handle slick in my palm. I had done it. I had faced the dragon, and I hadn't flinched. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the fight. That night, I called the number on the business card. "Davies," the voice answered, crisp and immediate. "Mr. Davies, it's Leo." There was a pause. "Leo, is everything all right?" "Titan Quarry paid me a visit," I said. "They made an offer. I refused." I could hear him exhale on the other end of the line. "Good," he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "That was the right move. Their first offer is always an insult." "Mr. Davies, I found something on the property, something my grandfather hid." I took a deep breath and told him everything. The secret compartment, the letters, the fossil, the debt, the whole hidden history of the place. I talked for 20 minutes straight, the words pouring out of me. He listened patiently, not interrupting once. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Mr. Davies, are you there?" "I'm here, Leo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here. I had no idea. Your father never... He just said the land was important to your mother. That's all. A sentimental value." "He didn't know," I said. "My grandfather kept it from everyone." "Leo," Mr. Davies said, his voice firm now, all business again, but a different kind of business, the voice of an ally. "You cannot do this alone. Titan will not just walk away. They will use lawyers. They will use pressure. You need help. You've done the right thing by refusing to sell." Now we need to do the next right thing." "What's that?" I asked. "We don't sell," he said. "We protect. I know some people at the State University, in the paleontology department, and I know a few environmental lawyers who owe me a favor and who hate Titan Quarry with a passion. Let me make some calls. Don't talk to anyone else. Just sit tight and be careful." We hung up. I stood in the middle of my cabin, the little oil lamp casting a warm, steady glow. For the first time, I wasn't just a boy in a broken house. I was a guardian. I had allies, and I had a story to protect. The choice had been made. Now the consequences were coming. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of quiet solitude and anxious waiting. I worked on the cabin and the land, my hands growing calloused, my body growing stronger. I fell into the rhythm of the mountain. I learned the patterns of the birds, the places where the wild raspberries grew thickest, the way the light changed on the rock face of the cave entrance throughout the day. The place was becoming a part of me. But in the back of my mind, the threat of Titan loomed. Every unfamiliar engine sound on the main road made me jump. I felt like I was living in a bubble, and I didn't know when it was going to burst. Then, one morning, a sensible sedan, a car that looked completely out of place on my rugged dirt track, pulled into the clearing. A woman in her 50s with practical hiking boots and a kind, intelligent face got out. "Leo?" she asked, her smile genuine. "I'm Dr. Aris Thorne, from the university's geology department. David Davies sent me." She was followed by a younger man who introduced himself as Ben, a graduate student in paleontology. Mr. Davies had come through. They didn't come with clipboards and contracts. They came with respect. I took them to the cave. I led them into the cool darkness, my footsteps sure and familiar now. I watched their faces as I shone my powerful new flashlight on the fossil. Ben just whispered, "Oh my God," over and over. Dr. Thorne was silent, her expression one of pure, unadulterated awe. She approached the wall slowly, as if it were a sacred altar. "It's a pliosaur," she finally said, her voice hushed. "A complete one. The preservation it's unheard of. This is one of the most significant late Cretaceous finds in North America, possibly the world." She turned to me, her eyes shining. "Your grandfather, he wasn't just a protector, he was a brilliant custodian. To keep this hidden, to keep it safe, for all these years, it's a miracle." That was the beginning of a new chapter. Dr. Thorne and her team became my allies, my partners. They understood the threat from Titan. They knew the fight wouldn't be easy. The university's lawyers, prodded by Mr. Davies, stepped in. They helped me file for a conservation easement and to have the site officially declared a place of state scientific heritage. It was a mountain of paperwork, a slow, grinding process designed to wear you down. Titan fought us at every turn. They filed nuisance claims about property lines. They sent surveyors who tried to accidentally wander onto my land. They tried to lobby the State Historical Board, arguing that quarrying the limestone would be of greater economic benefit to the community. But we had something they didn't. We had the truth, and we had the story. My grandfather's journals became part of the official record, a testament to his decades-long guardianship. The story of his sacrifice, his secret debt, his love for the land, was more powerful than any economic projection. It gave the fight a heart. During this time, I wasn't just a passive observer. I was part of the team. I worked with Ben and the other students, learning the basics of fossil preservation. I helped them map the cave, my intimate knowledge of its passages proving invaluable. They paid me a small stipend for my work, enough to live on. I was earning my keep, protecting my inheritance through my own labor. I was no longer just the boy who had been given a secret. I was becoming the man who was earning the right to keep it. The fight dragged on for over a year. There were days of frustration, of feeling like we were drowning in legal red tape while a billion-dollar corporation tried to bleed us dry. But there were also moments of pure joy. Like the day Ben found a second, smaller fossil, a juvenile, tucked away in another part of the cave system. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a nursery. The scientific value of the site skyrocketed. The community in Harmony, initially wary of the outsiders, started to come around. The old woman from the general store, whose name I learned was Martha, would save me fresh eggs. The diner started giving our university team a discount. They saw we weren't there to exploit the mountain, but to understand it. They saw my grandfather's legacy being honored, and in a small town where memory is long, that meant something. They had chosen a side, my side. The final victory came not in a courtroom, but in a quiet meeting at the state capitol. Faced with overwhelming scientific evidence, a compelling human story, and the threat of a very public, very ugly legal battle, Titan Quarry officially withdrew their claim. They walked away. They had lost. I got the call from Mr. Davies. "It's over, Leo," he said, his voice filled with a satisfaction that went beyond professional duty. "You won." I hung up the phone and walked out of the cabin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I looked at the trees, the clearing, the path leading to the cave. This place, which had once been a symbol of my abandonment, was now the foundation of my entire life. I had honored my grandfather. I had protected my mother's sanctuary. And in doing so, I had found myself. The seasons turned. The raw wound of my past began to scar over, fading from a constant ache to a dull, occasional throb. The cabin was no longer a wreck. With a grant from the university and help from Ben and some folks in town, we had put on a new roof, installed new windows, and even run a modest solar panel for electricity. It was small, it was simple, but it was a home. My home. The cave was now a protected research site. Dr. Thorne and her team worked there several months out of the year, their meticulous work slowly revealing more of the mountain's secrets. They were my colleagues, my friends. I was an official employee of the university, the site custodian and research assistant for the Westfall Hollow Paleontological Preserve. The title always made me smile. It was a long way from unnecessary complication. I spent my days guiding student groups, helping with the painstaking work of cleaning and preserving the fossils and maintaining the land. I learned the names of the rocks, the plants, the stars. My life was quiet, but it was full. It was meaningful. One afternoon I was sitting on my new porch, reading one of my mother's favorite books that I'd found in her journal, when Mr. Davies' car pulled up. He got out, looking less like a lawyer and more like a man on vacation. He was carrying a small, flat package. "David," I said, smiling. We were on a first-name basis now. "What brings you all the way out here?" "I was in the area," he said, which was his code for, "I wanted to check on you." He handed me the package. "This came to my office. It's from Brenda." My smile faded. I hadn't heard from her, or about her, since the day I left. I hadn't wanted to. I took the package. It was a cashier's check for $5,000. There was a note attached, written on a plain piece of paper. "This is the money I received from Titan. I don't want it. I'm selling the house and moving away." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a transaction. It was her way of washing her hands of me, of the whole affair. A final, quiet click of the door. I looked at the check. A year ago, this money would have been a lifeline. It would have been everything. Now, it was just paper. "What are you going to do with it?" David asked, watching me. I thought about it for a moment. I could use it to buy a new truck. I could put it in the bank, but that felt wrong. The money was tainted by her intentions. I folded the check and tucked it into my pocket. "The town's library needs a new roof," I said, "and Martha at the store has been talking about setting up a scholarship fund for local kids who want to study science. I think it could do some good there." David nodded slowly, a deep, approving smile on his face. "Your grandfather would be proud of you, Leo. Your mother, too." I looked out at the trees, their leaves just beginning to turn the fiery colors of autumn. The air was crisp and clean. I thought about the word inheritance. When I first came here, I thought it was about property, about things you were given. I was wrong. My inheritance wasn't the deed to the land. It wasn't even the fossil hidden in the stone. My real inheritance was the choice to turn a burden into a purpose, the choice to protect something beautiful rather than exploit it, the choice to build a home instead of just owning a house. My grandfather didn't leave me something to have. He left me something to do. He gave me a story to finish, and in finishing it, I found my own beginning. The past doesn't have to be a prison. The things that break us don't have to define us. Sometimes the most worthless-looking things, the broken-down cabins, the forgotten caves, the parts of ourselves we think are damaged beyond repair, are just waiting for us to see their true value. They're waiting for us to choose to rebuild. So I want to ask you, what does inheritance mean to you? It doesn't have to be land or money. Maybe it's a story from your grandmother, a skill your father taught you, a stubborn resilience you got from your mother. What is the true inheritance you've been given? Share it in the comments below. I read every single one, and I believe our stories are the most valuable things we have. They are the maps that guide others through the dark. If this story meant something to you, if it resonated with the struggles and the hopes in your own life, consider subscribing. Let's build a community here, a place where we honor these kinds of stories, the ones about finding light in the darkness and building a home in the wilderness of our own lives. Thank you for listening. Be well, and be brave enough to see the value in the things the world has written off, especially when that thing is yourself.